out of storm
and manifold perils,
rose an enduring state.
The home
of freedom
and unity. I love that. That's amazing.
Freedom and unity is a delicate balance. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's challenging. Too much freedom without unity leads to chaos. Too much unity without freedom, well, leads to totalitarianism. Vermont Stands Up is a decidedly nonpartisan, non-ideological organization that emerged during the early days of COVID as a response to many Vermonters' perception that we were rushing as a state headlong into the strange COVID-topian moment.
Has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus.
In death rate is likely to hit in 2 weeks. Therefore, we will be extending our guidelines to April 30th to slow the spread.
A lot of the movement was, let's look to the FDA and the CDC. These are our experts. They're going to be our guide. And after 20 years plus of teaching students the problems with the FDA, the problems with the CDC, the EPA, I thought to myself, well, these are absolutely not our experts. These are absolutely not our guides. I would not trust them at all.
Well, we knew right away what the governor said on that Friday. He sent us all home on Friday saying we're not shutting down the schools. It would be the worst thing we could do. When they locked down the schools and sent all my kids home, I knew something was wrong. Mentally, physically, it's a warm place for them. It's still cold in March. My kids went home to cold, smoky houses. A lot of times they had to babysit other kids because their parents or their aunt still had to work. And there was no childcare, so I had like 6th grade girls who were stuck babysitting out of control kids for months at a time with no end in sight. I mean, just the hopelessness. The kids were forgotten. That was the worst part. Yeah, sorry.
I've been really disappointed by how much we culturally tell stories about how to protect ourselves by being adversarial to what's around us rather than in relationship and in balance with what's around us. We're sort of transferring a lot of language of the war on terror and this idea of sort of fighting something phantom out there that's always there and hard to define.
And Americans and Vermonters need to stand up against fear and decide if they're a courageous, independent, self-reliant people who survived the Great Depression and the flu without terror. Where is that character? Where is that courage, particularly for our children?
Fear is an understandable and evolutionarily important human instinct, and propagandists and censors understand how to use fear to motivate. Propaganda and censorship are always brought to you by the very players who seek to win if that story becomes a reality.
One of the most troubling pieces for me was the propaganda behind, well, you might be safe and you're good, but you do this for grandma, and it's like, then you see now, they never knew it was gonna, it doesn't stop transmission. It doesn't stop you from getting it, right? And so how could that be marketed if it was never studied, in the research that this was going to stop transmission? Like, how could Vermont, how could the country and the media make commercials to make people feel bad that, oh, this is who you do it for. You might be fine, you may have already had it and you're good and you're healthy, but you do it for this person. I mean, those were like blatant lies.
Where is the accountability for this government? The First Amendment is the bulwark against government indoctrination, government tyranny. There's not just one amendment, they're all a package deal. But boy, that First Amendment is so powerful if we're ever to hold government accountable.
Having to articulate yourself, the best version of your position, doesn't happen when you're around people that you always agree with. Everything's just taken for granted, and you don't have to cultivate an understanding of where you're coming from or articulate where you're coming from. Society needs us to be able to think out loud and respond to each other and to not have just blind spots everywhere, to be able to see reflected in other people's perspectives what you're missing and what the people around you are missing, so that either it can fill in your blind spots or it can help cultivate a stronger position for yourself.
I see humanity as maturing out of that childlike state where we're just taking in information and we're not evaluating it and we're letting it lead us around by the nose, and we're moving through the trivium, right, of like now we're starting to understand and put it in context and compare notes with each other, which is a hugely important part. That's what I love about things like Vermont Stands Up and what's been happening, just the natural coming together that's happening. All that superficial stuff is mattering less and less and less.
Small d democracy is a deliberative process. It takes time. It takes resources. It takes difficult conversations. It takes listening to many different points of view. Vermont Stands Up is here for that reason.
There's so much information out there, but I think with Vermont Stands Up, one of the things that I see that has really come together is keeping an eye on what's going on. You know, what laws are coming into play? What's the legislation look like? Is that going to serve the people? Is that constructive? Is that destructive? You know, where do we need to move with that? And then activating people.
That interests me a lot, the idea of envisioning different stories that we tell ourselves in terms of how we relate to the natural world, including where we feel anxiety and fear about threats with health or the environment. That feels important.
And we celebrate here in Vermont, as Vermonters, our history of freedom and unity. Moving forward, let us not punish Vermonters who exhibit that spirit of freedom and unity if and when the next crisis emerges.
Those who have courage and strength and the conviction of believing in freedom and the ideas that we say we stand for, it's time to stand up, or it all will fall.
This is a rebirth for humanity, but we can't lose this opportunity. We have to hustle. We have to work like super hard. It's not just going to happen on its own. It's really up for grabs right now.
Let us work together as Vermonters in dialogue and debate with one another, rather than succumbing to propaganda, to censorship, to crisis.
And Vermont has come out of more than one storm. And the biggest storm that's ever confronted Vermont may be here right now in the form of the COVID lies. And we need to come together in those principles of freedom while we still have them, in unity, and try to have compassion for other people and ask them to join us. Because that's where our power lies. We don't have power individually. United we stand.
There's a lot of divide and conquer, a lot of let's be divided around, race, culture, gender, politics, religion. And so if we can unify, if the people can unify, then I feel like we're going to have more of a chance to hold on to freedom and to maintain freedom for our state and people and country and world.